Topic 1 on the verge of a historic ballot to be or not to be for the democracy in Moldova. Simple as that. Second tour of the ballot underway right now. Second topic, some are saying that aiding to Ukraine is just not worth it and is just too expensive. Let us calculate what would it cost not aiding Ukraine. And the third topic, UATV English talks to British researcher, lecturer, linguist, historian, doctor in philosophy by Oxford University, and a spectacular author specializing in modern Eastern Europe, particularly Russia under Vladimir Putin's usurped reign, Dr. Jade McGlynn. Good afternoon. These topics in more detail in a daily episode with me, Henry Keane, and UATV English doing our best as usual to bring the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. After none of the 11 candidates secured over 50% in the first round of voting in October 20th, Moldova's Central Election Commission announced a second round. A referendum on EU integration was also held on the same day. Vote counting showed near parity between supporters and opponents, with 50.39% favouring EU membership and 49.6% opposing it. A verge of democracy indeed, and the outcome is extremely important for Ukraine, for obvious reasons. In easy terms, Maya Sandu with so far 42% means freedom, and Stoianoglo with 26% means Putin. Stoianoglo positions himself somewhere in between East and West, whatever he thinks it means, with rhetoric that contrasts sharply with Sandu's policies. Under Sandu's leadership, finally, Moldova cut ties with the Kremlin and supported Ukraine amid Russia's full-scale invasion. Sandu asserts that Stoianoglo is a Kremlin ally and warns that his victory could bring uncertainty and instability. Stoianoglo, in turn, denies this, accusing Sandu of pursuing divisive policies in a country with a significant Russian-speaking population, which is a very, very usual pretext for the Kremlin, by the way. The outcome of this election will set the tone for the next year's parliamentary elections, where Sandu's party would have to fight its way through to majority.
What happened yesterday, as well as in the last 2 years, is an attack on the democracy and freedom of our people, an attack on the aspirations of our people to be part of the European family, part of the European world. The enemies of our people want a divided, frightened Moldova. They want Moldovans to doubt their strengths and unity. I respect the will of our citizens. The citizens have decided by a majority of votes that Moldova will follow the path of European integration.
Stoianoglo, who gained 26% in the first round, has stated that he would support EU integration as president, but also aims to maintain relations with Russia in Moldova's national interest, of course. Well, and I know how he will do it. He will just cede Moldova's national interest to Putin and seal the deal, as simple as that. After all, the dictatorship is a stability. In some sense, indeed, when someone just chooses your ways for you. Following that Stoianoglo logic, the most stable political and economic regime would be slavery. What if Olaf Scholz is not a coward, and Viktor Orban of Hungary and Sarah Wagenknecht of Germany are not Putin's toys and are real patriots of their respective countries? Maybe indeed it is time to admit that everyone has a problem on their own, and it is too expensive for the collective West to deal with the Ukrainian problem. Maybe the collective West should abandon Ukraine after all. Maybe it should just say, no, wait, that is it. Enough is enough. Maybe it is time for clear mind and straight figures that should be taken into account, and not all these, outdated human values and emotional talks about freedom and sovereignty. Was kostet es, die Ukraine nicht zu unterstützen? What is the cost of not supporting Ukraine? This is an article by German Kiel Media by Johannes Binder and Moritz Scholarik. Let me quote a part of it for you. Even if we are to forget about morality and the fact that people cannot be killed, even if we are to forget that giving up Ukraine to Putin means giving up on not just land, but millions of people into a stinking dictatorship. Even if we are to forget that victory over Ukraine will inevitably lead to new wars. All the pretexts like, oh, in the Baltics, Russians are being offended, or northern Kazakhstan is our originally Russian land, etc., etc., etc. Even if we are to talk only money here, it is worse for Europe to support Ukraine simply because in case of Russia's victory, all the costs of European countries will be way higher than current spending on aid. Since the beginning of the war, Germany has provided military aid to Ukraine in the total amount of 10.6 billion euros, which is about 0.1% of the country's GDP. Ending the support today will lead to Russia's victory tomorrow, a significant increase in Germany's spending on its own defense, an influx of refugees, as well as a loss of trade with Ukraine and all of the investments. In such a scenario, Germany's annual spending will amount to 1 or 2% of GDP, which is approximately 10 to 20 times higher than the current military support for Ukraine. Well, I hate to break it to you like that, but it does not matter what you think. Things are what they are, whatever you think of them. And Vladimir Putin is a dictator. And he is an outdated Soviet monster and a murderer and a child kidnapper and a racist. He won't stop even if you think he will. Give this man a chance and you will face a World War III exactly in a way the first two world wars happened. Because those who should have fight a monster were trying to reason him. I have an honor and a pleasure to give you a British researcher, lecturer, linguist, historian, a spectacular author specializing in modern Eastern Europe, particularly Russia, under Vladimir Putin's dictatorship, doctor in philosophy by Oxford University, Dr. Jade McGlynn. Good afternoon, ma'am. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all mine, and thank you for finding time and joining us. Well, let's go straight forward to questions. In 2020, you obtained your Doctor of Philosophy in Oxford for your dissertation, Relieving the Past, How the Russian Government and Media Use History to Frame the Present. And how exactly do they do it?
They have a variety of methods, but in particular, there's a very constant use of historical analogies and a very constant way to make the past seem as if it's threatened. So I don't need to explain to Ukrainians, for example, the different ways that, at the very highest levels of the Kremlin, there have been efforts such as the 2021 National Security Strategy, such as, of course, Putin's infamous essay on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians, to present the past as something that needs to be protected, as something that there is just one truth. And of course, it's the Russian version of the truth in their mind, and that it's under deep threat and that this causes an existential struggle or problem for Russians. So there's this constant introduction of history and historical narratives that need to be defended, including militarily, right. Even though these historical narratives are just myths.
Propaganda. Is that the one way to say it?
Yeah, propaganda is another perfect way of saying it.
All right, okay, well, let me try to smoothly slide to another question. Can we say that the DPRK cannon fodder in Ukraine is Putin's provocation of the West? And provocation has, well, at least so far, going well, as the West is either too timid or too stupid to act decisively.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I almost don't even think it's a provocation. I think it's a laughing in the West's face. And like you say, I think the West is either too stupid or too timid or probably both to understand what is going on. But it's also, I think, again, the result of Russian propaganda in the West this time. So the constant iteration, that Russia would use nuclear weapons, that, if you help Ukraine, for example, by giving them approval to use Storm Shadow missiles. Right. Then that will lead to a dangerous escalation. And I think we see the sheer mockery with which Russia treats the West by the fact that they threaten that that's an escalation. But of course, sending thousands of North Korean troops is not.
Well, sheer mockery, I like the way you put it. Russians are obviously using the territory of the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to deploy more military personnel and ammunition and explosives recently. Very concerning, if you ask me, to put it mildly. So let's speculate. What's to expect, you think, Doctor?
It's funny because I was in Zaporizhia about 2 weeks ago, and it was thankfully a very quiet day then. But I was there to talk about what's happening on the occupied parts of Zaporizhia region, to talk with people, with experts there who are involved with that process, and with trying to maintain links to the resistance there. And it was sort of it followed, I suppose, the increase, or it came alongside the increase in aerial bombs being used against the city of Zaporizhia, and there's been a lot of talk also here in the West that the Russians were going to try to basically start another kind of line of offensive in the Zaporizhia direction. It seems as if they're struggling with that, partly because a miracle has happened and Russian soldiers appear to be tiring of being forced into so-called meat storms, or human waves in the English term. But unfortunately, this is why the importance of Russia being able to bring North Korean soldiers, it does still have effect, because Russia is, of course, going back to its traditional way of warfighting, of just attrition and just throwing men at the problem. And I think anybody who can look at a map can work out that's obviously going to be very, very difficult for Ukrainians.
Obviously. And also, do you, Doctor, personally believe that with this war of attrition now, Ukraine will be invited to NATO in, say, I don't know, 3 years from now?
I don't know, to be honest. Of course, I think it should be invited to NATO. I think it should have been invited to NATO already. And I think if this issue had been resolved sooner, there's every chance that this big war since 2022 wouldn't be happening. So it's a tragedy. However, in terms of what happens now, I think it's very difficult to say, because if we're honest, a NATO invitation depends on support from the US, and that support isn't there right now. And I'm not sure with either of the two current presidential candidates it's going to become more likely. So I think the problem is an American one. I think there are other options. So, for example, the JEF, which is a sort of subset, it's kind of now become a subset of NATO. I think there are other options, but I think that realistically, I'm not sure to what extent, and we'll only know properly after the results of next week's elections in the US are clear. I'm not sure to what extent not just Ukraine, but all of Europe has to contend with a post-NATO as we knew it.
Yeah, well, it makes
era.
Two of us, right?
Yeah.
Not sure, absolutely. Last question for tonight. Say Putin dies, amen to that, tomorrow. Do you really believe that Russian ways, let's put it that way, Russian ways will change significantly?
No, I don't. I think that the best thing that could be hoped for would be a sort of a change to a more technocratic individual. I think there will be a change, but I think that the most likely, we've all seen that the most likely threat to Putin has come from the extreme nationalist wing. It's certainly not come from the so-called liberal opposition or the sort of dissidents. And there's every reason to think that that's where any future political energy will come from, because they're the only individuals with the scope to mobilize with support among the elites. And we know that's an important part in any regime transition. So I doubt that there will be a huge change either way. But if there is a change, then I think it will probably be, it's much more likely to be for the worse than for the better, unfortunately. I wish I had a different answer.
I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for this amazing conversation, and for your time, for expertise, for shedding at least some light onto us tonight in easy terms. I hope we talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Goodbye. A British researcher, lecturer, linguist, a historian, and an author specializing in particularly Russia under Putin's usurped reign, doctor in philosophy by Oxford University, Dr. Jade McGlynn, was at UATV English studio with us tonight. That was it for tonight. It was me, Henry Keane, and my team at UATV English. Yet another attempt to deliver some hard truth in, we hope, easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Please in turn like, share and comment. Your voice matters. It helps Ukraine to raise its voice in turn. Stay tuned for more, and goodbye.